I made a custom keyboard that's super easy to build. An ergonomic keyboard with 42 switches that everyone could make. Or at least, that's the plan. I'll show you all the steps of the creation of this keyboard, and I invite you to ask questions if you want any more information about a specific step. I stream all of my work on Twitch and would gladly take the time to help you in your keyboard projects. So why did I make this keyboard? There are two main reasons. Firstly, I have a friend who is really interested in keyboards. She's also practicing to build her own keyboards with soldered switches. I make keyboards from scratch and already have quite some experience with PCB design, 3D modeling, and the code to create firmware for the keyboards. So the goal of this keyboard is to create a keyboard that is as simple as possible to build yourself with only limited soldering experience. There's also a second reason why I make this keyboard. I created a keyboard for the specific purpose of practicing my stenography. Stenography is a method of shorthand writing. If you want more information about stenography itself, head over to my other video about the Direct03xD key. The problem I had with that keyboard is that it uses an ortholinear layout, which didn't feel quite right for my hand. An ortholinear layout in a keyboard is a layout where the keys are laid out in a fixed grid. I want to make another version of the stenography keyboard, where I'm using column stagger instead. Column stagger is very frequently used in ergonomic keyboards. The slight shift in columns accounts for the different lengths of your fingers. I didn't want to build a keyboard that's exclusively used for stenography, so I added another row and ended up with a 42-key keyboard. So now you know why I made this keyboard. But how does this impact the design decisions of the keyboard? I want the keyboard to be as easy to solder as possible. So ideally, I avoid a matrix layout and choose a direct pin layout instead. Let me quickly try to explain what a matrix layout is. In the code, you can make a choice on how the microcontroller is trying to send the input. There are multiple options, where the two most common ones are a matrix scan or a direct scan. In a direct scan, each switch is connected to their own pin on the microcontroller. In a matrix layout, you create a matrix of pins, where you select a number of input pins and a number of output pins. You can assign a switch to each combination of input and output pins. Direct pin layouts can only have as many switches as pins on the microcontroller. With 21 pins, you could only have 21 switches. A matrix layout can have as many pins as the multiplication of the input pins and output pins. With 21 pins, you could have up to 110 switches, 10 times 11. To prevent ghosting in a matrix scan, you need a diode on each switch, and each diode introduces another 2 points to solder. Choosing a direct scan over a matrix scan makes the soldering a bunch easier. This is already a huge improvement over my previous designs. The microcontroller I am using for this keyboard is a ProMicro NRF52840. It has 21 pins, which is the exact amount I need for a split 42-key keyboard. One problem here. In my KiCad libraries, I don't have the footprint that includes the final 3 pins. So I had to quickly adapt the footprint to include those 3 pins. Simple, right? What could go wrong? I want to give the keyboard the option to be created with either hot swap socket or soldered connections. This is pretty easily done by creating a custom footprint for the switches that includes both options. I also want to make the PCB reversible, so I only have to order one design that will work for both the left and the right side. This does significantly reduce the cost of manufacturing, but introduces the requirement for a jumper pad because the microcontroller itself is not reversible. The jumper pads give me the choice to route the connections afterwards, because some pins on the left-hand side don't have the same functionality as the ones on the right-hand side. A simple example here is that you don't want to reverse the polarity of the battery. And finally, I added a little pocket for the battery to be secured in the PCB sandwich. In the past, I created some keyboards with a replaceable 14250 battery. These do look cool and give you amazing battery life, but they are also quite chunky and require a battery management system for safe charging. I wanted to keep this keyboard as sleek as possible, so I ended up choosing a 601020 cell battery. I'm making a PCB sandwich keyboard. So in my KiCad design, I also created a switch plate that gives the keys some stability, and I created a backplate that protects the components. The backplate is also the ideal spot to give the keyboard some extra personality. I can give the backplate some custom design, and if I later get bored of it, I just order a new backplate with a new design or new colors. So for my design, I created a repeating pattern from my favorite Twitch emotes. And then in Inkscape, I transformed this design into a vector file. Then I upload the vector file in KiCad, and it's done. Very easy and really cool. A quick recap about the choices I made. I chose a direct pin layout. I created the option for hot swap sockets and soldered connections. I added jumper pad for a reversible PCB, and I added a pocket for the battery. Now everything is ready and we can order the parts. It's always a little stressful waiting for a PCB to arrive. You have to wait and hope that you didn't make any mistakes. Fixing mistakes in a PCB most likely requires adding jumper wires and slicing traces. This is not really user-friendly. The PCB looks amazing. I really love the pattern on the backplate, and everything looks fine at first sight. So let's start building this keyboard. What are the components that I need? This is a list of the components that we need for each half. We need a PCB, a backplate and a switch plate. We need 21 hot swap sockets, a power switch, a microcontroller, and the GPIO pins. We need a 601020 battery, our 7 M2 screws, and our 14 M2 spacers. Then we can finally start soldering everything together. Oh no, something is wrong. When I tried to align the microcontroller with the GPIO pins, I noticed that they don't exactly match. What does this mean? I messed up the custom footprint for the microcontroller. Not great. But we can fix this by soldering some flexible wires instead of the GPIO pins. I soldered them directly to the microcontroller and aligned them with the GPIO holes afterwards. Not ideal, but it'll work. Oh no, more mistakes are showing themselves. Trying to assemble the keyboard, I noticed that the power switch is taller than the spacers I prepared for them. This means the layers of the keyboard won't be parallel. How do I fix this? I ended up using a saw to cut a small section of the bottom plate to make space for the housing of the power switch. This is a very caveman solution, but it works. And we're all done. The keyboard I tried to make as easy as possible still ended up being a slight struggle to make, due to some mistakes I introduced myself. The alignment of the GPIO pins were fixed with some bendy wires, and I made some room for the power switch by cutting a notch in the backplate. Proper fixes to the custom footprint have already been made, so these mistakes won't happen in the future. The firmware for this keyboard is available on my GitHub in my ZMK config repository, and it is based on my 36 key layout, with some extra keys and a specific layer for stenography. After flashing the firmware, the keyboard is ready and I can actually start using it. Would you want some detailed explanation about my ZMK config? For the typing test of the keyboard, I have two forms of typing: a normal typing test with monkey type and a stenography practice session. This shows that the keyboard can easily be used for that purpose too. It also shows that I still need a lot of practice with stenography. This keyboard was a nice step forward to making the perfect keyboard. I'm a big fan of direct pin wiring. The PCB sandwich makes it very easy to manufacture, and it gives you an easy way to add some customization. I'll have to make a version 2.0, where I get rid of all the mistakes before I send it off to my friend for her soldering practice. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you want to see more of my work, or if you want a custom keyboard designed for you, get in contact with me over at Direct03xD.com. And if you want to learn more about stenography, have a look at the Sten03xD. I think we're done.